I guess we made it, brother.
We did.
We made it to 400.
400.
400. Pretty big number.
It
How's,
is.
how's everybody going? You have reached Native Opinion. We are an Indigenous information and education radio show and podcast. And every week we talk about current affairs related to and from our own Native American perspectives. Current affairs, things such as Nancy Pelosi deciding she's going to visit the Ukraine.
Why
I knew you were going to laugh.
why is she even in Ukraine?
Dude, did you even see the footage?
I saw
I mean,
some of it.
she couldn't have worn the any brighter blue. It's like, here I am, I'm a target. It's-
I think
I mean-
part of that was to honor the Ukraine flag. I think their flag is blue and yellow.
okay. Yeah, that's such a Democrat thing to do. I mean, anyway.
She doesn't.
Okay, let me rephrase that. A corporate Democrat thing to do.
Right.
Yes.
Did you see her? She could barely walk. She was shuffling along. The lady's in her 80s. She should
Exactly.
be at home enjoying her grandchildren,
Exactly.
feeding them
too.
ice cream from her freezer full of ice cream.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
I'm just done with all of them. I really am. I don't care what. Again, for new listeners, I consider myself a progressive Democrat, but even that's challenging at times. It's just I'm just done with it all. So
No, I get it. I do. And, pardon the expression, but we, the people of the United States, need our asses kicked for allowing all of this crap to be shoved down our throats. Period. Nancy Pelosi should have been gone a long time ago. Everybody in her age group should have been gone a long time ago. Anybody serving 5, 10, 15 terms in office should have been gone a long time ago.
I mean, I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you today in this episode, before we even get into any of the substantial content, but really having to do with the fact that we're now creeping up on $40 billion, I think, of aid to the Ukraine. And, I don't want to sound insensitive and things like that. And we support, trying to get the frickin' Russians out of there any way possible. And I understand, a lot of the nuances around that. But at the same time, we can't even get the Voting Rights Act passed. We can't even get the full Build Back Better agenda passed, which had a lot of things important to American people passed.
Sure.
But we can, as soon as it's a military type of venture, all of a sudden, plenty of money.
Yep.
We gave away trillions, literally trillions of dollars during the early aspects of the COVID pandemic. And a lot of that money went to corporations.
Yep.
So I really have a problem when I see figures in the billions leaving the country without some sort of balancing act, to help, American people as a whole. Regardless if I'm an indigenous man or not, there's a lot of people that need a lot of help right now, financially and otherwise. And, this country's priorities are flipped upside down and sideways. So,
Well, yeah, that goes back to part of what I was saying about, collectively the Americans in this nation need our asses kicked because we allowed this crap to happen to us. There's no accountability, absolutely zero accountability for lawmakers to pull the shenanigans that they do. I almost said the S word.
no, it's true though. I mean,
There's no accountability. We gave them the reins to make laws that govern them, and the corporations stood on the sidelines and watched and said, "Huh,
watched
Yeah.
and had their hands out.
well, they stood by and watched and see if it could be gotten away with, and it was gotten away with. So the corporation said, "Okay, we're going to write the bills, and you're going to pass them," and that's what happens. We don't get to vote on any of the laws that get passed. We don't get to vote on any of the bills that come across and presented on the floor of the House and the Senate. We don't get to vote on those.
Nope. Not at all.
So, you know,
Yeah, these guys come crying every November, given whatever particular year it lands on, and begging us and telling us, or in essence, not threatening, but making up stories as to why you need to vote for them and their particular party.
Yep.
And then, as you just said, once they're in office, they're like, "I'm representing you." You know what I mean? And again, I pointed this out before, and so if you guys watch the video version of this show, you know what I mean. They also shake they can't point with their hands. They have to do this thing with their knuckle,
right.
or they put their thumb out like this when they want to make a solid emotional point. You gotta vote Democrat. You gotta vote for me. You gotta vote Republican because this country's going all to hell. And I just want to make sure you understand why me putting my knuckle right here. It's just just do your job. Just do your job.
That's what they
And if you
need to do,
don't-
but
Yeah.
we don't hold them accountable. There's no accountability. There's absolutely no accountability. Look at all the crap that's happened in the last 3 years. How much accountability has there been? Zippo.
Yep.
So, people all the time say to me, "Well, why do you care so much? They represent us." No, they don't represent me.
No, they represent their corporate donors.
That's absolutely who they represent.
And then they argue amongst themselves, meaning basically two political parties. So that's not representation, folks.
No,
it just
it
isn't.
is not.
I don't care what particular party you want to show your support to, or even a faction within that party, like in my case. But there's just so many bad apples at this point. Nothing's ever going to get done, not unless you're some kind of corporate entity and you're donating to one or more of these idiots, and then they'll swing the pendulum in terms of legislation your direction. But other than that, things that make sense, like the Voting Rights Act, no.
Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. And it's sad because a majority of America sits back, fat, dumb, and happy, and has no clue as to what's being done to them.
Yep. And that's
I
on the broader
sincerely mean
scale.
that.
No, I know. On that as a broader fact, but we talk about legislation that affects Indian country here, and it by the time you start delving into our issues, you know what I mean, we're not even a blip on their radar.
No, not at
So-
all. Not at all. It's like, okay, next item. Indians. We'll talk about them later. Next item.
Yep,
That's
next.
what it's like.
Yep. And we actually have some good stories today to share that sort of demonstrate that, I think, a little bit. That actually, the first one is up on International,
Yep.
which will show you how certain countries are actually doing a better job acknowledging indigenous people than this country is. But no surprise there, right?
No, none. Well, brother, you want to tell our listeners how to reach the show?
I will. So again, as always, you can reach us by email, first and foremost, I guess. That's hosts with an S, hosts@nativeopinion.com. We're also available out on Twitter. It's @nativeopinion over there. Our Facebook page, of course, it's facebook.com/Native Opinion Podcast. And our website, it's nativeopinion.com. This is also a podcast, as well as now, I guess, a video podcast, which will be released through YouTube in terms of a video format. Also, it will be released to Facebook and also Twitter at later dates. But you can also subscribe to the audio podcast version on any of the major podcast directories. You can also leave us a voicemail at 860-800-5595. 860-800-5595 is that number if you want to comment on any of our past Now, at this point, 400 episodes. so,
That's right.
so any one of those ways will work, guys. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, we want to thank you for being with us for 400 episodes. And here at the show, we want our listeners to know we appreciate every bit of support we have received from you over these many episodes and years. And it doesn't matter what form that support is in, we thank you for listening. And there are patrons who support us financially to produce this show. And all of that support goes directly to our costs and expenses associated with producing the show. So if you would like to become a patron, you can do that, please, by joining other wonderful folks who have contributed to this show by becoming a patron. And you can see how to do that on our website at nativeopinion.com/support and on our Facebook page. Just click on the Learn More button. And another great way to help is by telling friends, family, and colleagues about the show and give us a 5-star review on iTunes. It does help us grow, and we thank you, everyone, each and every one, for growing with us.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you very, very much. Especially because we know funds are short. Seriously.
Oh, yes.
And coming out of a pandemic, people trying to find their way back to work and all those kinds of things. So anytime, donations are sent this way, we just understand we completely appreciate that and really, really do mean that from the bottom of our hearts. I also want to very quickly mention my wife and I's business, Mohegan Trading Post. We sell authentic handmade Native American crafts, beaded jewelry, apparel such as t-shirts, for summertime. We also sell natural food products such as wild rice and flour, batter mixes, natural jams and jellies. And then coming very, very soon, we're also going to be offering traditionally made maple syrup and other maple products that are produced right on my reservation, the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Reservation here in the state of Connecticut. The website is also going through a redesign right now. The old site is still visible, so if you guys want to check out the products that we have there, just go to MoheganTradingPost.com, and we really do appreciate that patronage as well. So thank you very, very much.
Yes, thank you, Mohegan Trading Post. You guys carry beads for all the beaters out there, don't you?
We do, but that's not on the website as of yet. There's literally about 1,000 different color variations that we sell in the local store in Connecticut. But it's going to be some work to get those up on the website. And I think we're selling 3 different sizes at this point. But as I said, it's really the color variations. So we'll get those out shortly, and over time.
Yeah, I know it's a good time to get them out. There's a lot of beaters out there, and powwows are coming back.
Yeah, we just got visited. We call him Leather Dan. He's from upper state New York, and we have some nice pieces of leather now too. Some different hides from deer, and really, really cool. Really
Nice.
good to see those guys too. So yeah, a lot of good stuff, man. People starting to show up. It's pretty funny. It's only been open. The retail store has only been open about 8 months now, and people are starting to find us. So it's pretty interesting. It's kind of like a little community gathering place,
Sure, absolutely.
So we're loving it, getting back in touch with people, especially post COVID, right? Fingers crossed, post COVID. But yeah, so. But all right. But again, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. All right, you're listening to episode 400.
Big 400.
And it seemed like something that was a far-fetched dream way back when.
Yeah.
Truly.
Who the hell wanted to listen to us? It's just-
And we want you to know what a journey it has been.
Yep.
It really has been a wonderful journey to make it to this point.
Yep.
Um,
We started basically around, I think it was December of 2015, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
it was either October or December. October keeps sticking in my mind for some reason. I'm not
Could be.
sure of the date. It was so long ago. It's easy to find out what it is, but it's somewhere in that vicinity. It's that long ago.
On occasion, I listen back, and you can hear little nuances like our old microphones and stuff like that. Yeah, this is like episode one. It's like, I was like, oh my God,
Right.
damn, So,
Yep. See, like I said, what a journey it has been.
I know. So now we're trying to dabble in a little bit of video. We'll see what happens. So,
There you go.
but
All right. In today's show, we're going to talk about free, prior, and informed consent, or I call it FPIC.
yes,
And
yes.
FPIC is a right that is recognized by international standards like the UN delegation or declaration, on the rights of indigenous people and the International Labor Organization Convention. The uranium contamination off our lands. Residents tell nuclear regulatory commissioners, take it off our lands.
Yep.
We don't want it. There's something else that angers me about mining that came up this early week and the end of last week. I'll mention it when we're talking about the uranium mining.
All right.
It's something we've talked about on the show before. And the right of Native people to subsistence fish, hunt, and gather other things, America now calls, air quoting, resources.
Yeah. Hate that word.
Yeah. Today we're going to share one example of the struggle of California Indians with their traditions being disrupted.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, in our first topic, Indigenous peoples say states must apply and enforce FPIC. Joseph Lee was the author of this information, and it's printed in Indian Country Today. Now, everywhere but in the United States, and I think maybe Canada, free, prior, and informed consent is the gold standard for Indigenous rights. It truly is.
Yep.
But it's rarely enforced. And, you have to ask, why is that? You have to ask. Everybody says, and when I say everybody, I speak of a lot of, constituents and, colleagues within Indian country that say we've come a long way from the days of, first contact and so on and so forth. And I listen with a nod and I let them finish. And I ask, but what's changed for us? And they ask me, well, what do you mean? I said, what's changed for us since the days of first contact? Well, everything, they say. And I said, think about that really, really carefully before you, structure your next sentence. I said, what's really changed for us since days of first contact? And they couldn't come up with an answer. In the grand scheme of things, nothing has changed, with the exception of they can't wantonly, legally, willy-nilly murder us like they did during first contact. That is about the only thing that has changed. They still take our land. They still take our resources. They tell us we can't fish or hunt or subsistence gather. All of these things still plague us as Indian people. So what has changed? Now in 2020, construction of Fossen Vind, an onshore wind energy complex, was completed on Norway's central coast. Now we're going to talk about what might be different for those people. The 151 turbines that make up one of Europe's largest onshore wind complexes, but the indigenous Sami peoples in the area say the wind farm is encroaching on their lands, endangering their reindeer herds, and threatening their way of life. Now, the president of
No,
the
it doesn't
Sami
say here. I'm sorry for interrupting. It doesn't say here, brother, but it sounds like these are dry land based.
yes,
And so, that's the slight difference between what they're dealing with and what our tribes here in in the Northeast are dealing with when they're, approximately 20 miles offshore. But the argument is the same.
it is
Okay.
the same.
It's an encroachment on our traditional lands. Period. End of story. Our territories.
Right. Now, the president of the Sami Parliament of Norway says that, the situation is just another example of how indigenous rights are being violated in favor of whether it be renewable energy projects or mining or whatever the case. Indigenous rights are still being violated. And this president of the Sami Parliament of Norway said, in a quote, the so-called green shift can take the form of green colonization, end quote. And she's right.
Yep.
She's absolutely correct. So again, I ask, what has really changed since first contact with indigenous people here in this country? I just gave an example in a country thousands of miles away in Norway. They're still doing the same thing to the indigenous people over there. They're still taking land.
And see, this is an area where I depart with my so-called progressive Democrat colleagues when we start talking about the Green New Deal, because and I understand here in this country the Green New Deal has a broad implication. It's not just about renewable energy sources. That's definitely a big piece of it, but it goes beyond that. But in terms of that renewable energy piece, this is when I depart and have to step back away from their agendas, because there's no context when it comes to these encroachments. Our rights are violated on an hourly basis
Absolutely.
when it comes to these efforts of renewable energy. If it's not the physical placement, the siting they call it, of these wind farm installations, it's the other side of it. It's the mining side of it for lithium. And so I don't hear these Green New Deal advocates stepping up for us as indigenous people and our indigenous rights whatsoever. So that tells me that political,
Expediency.
well, not just expediency, but I would say political support has limits. So if I'm a voter, an indigenous individual who everybody in Indian country, there was a big push to get out the native vote several years ago. I was one of them to get out and vote in that particular case. Actually, even voted against another indigenous man. I voted against Mark Charles. It was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, voting for Joe Biden, thinking that that I wanted to keep a tremendously immoral individual from getting back into the office. The Democrats botched that, and now we're having to have this individual return.
I don't think he will.
And
But that's for another story.
And B, we can have people supporting as quote unquote indigenous allies that are from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party in such areas like, Standing Rock, fighting against fossil fuel encroachments and the dangers that posed, which, to your point, as you opened up today, brother, really what has changed. The pipeline still went through. It actually still pumped oil. There was some stoppage at one point, but I think it's pumping again as we speak. So, we have to measure these things by permanency, in our activism. And so I don't see my progressive Democrat colleagues standing up and saying, hey, you know what? They have a point. Lithium mining is bad. It's the flip side of the renewable energy debate, pushing all these electric vehicles onto the road, thinking that we're doing better for planet Earth, but we're still mining lithium, which is as destructive in some cases as, doing fossil fuel production. So, I fail to understand this balance because I don't think it exists.
Well, okay. I was going to reserve this for the next segment, but I'll kind of use it as a early segue. Lithium mining has been one of the sticking points for a particular tribe whose territories include Thacker Pass.
Mm-hmm.
Now, excuse me, they've used a bit of kabuki theater to fast track mining at Thacker Pass by declaring the not unavailability of lithium, but the fact that we need to mine lithium in this country in large numbers. They've thrown it into the realm of national defense.
Mm.
So the Defense Department has been given the chore to find out how lithium, or the lack of lithium in this country, being mined lithium, will hurt national defense because we get a big chunk of our lithium, mined lithium from China. So now they've kind of shoved native peoples aside once again by using a national defense ploy and making it almost an absolute impossibility for those tribes to fight lithium mining.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the process takes a few years to get approval, they're going to fast track the beginning and the opening of that mine in Thacker Pass.
Well, as a matter of fact, brother, you used the word fast track. There's there's an actual function in the federal government called Fast 41 Act,
Yes.
and it is designed to do exactly that,
Yep.
to do the very bare minimum in terms of environmental assessment and also historic preservation assessment, and attempt to push these projects forward as quickly as possible. Now, I know that there has been a lot of effort, which I've been involved in, trying to do more tribal consultation, but, consultation versus action are two different things. And these are the arguments that we continue to wage in terms of these discussions. Now, how my rant earlier about progressive Democrat support waning in the areas because it's involved around the Green New Deal, we'll also circle back to the need or around our subject here of free and prior informed consent, which does not exist here in the United States when it comes to indigenous people. Does not exist. If it did, it would have helped us tremendously in terms of issues on these offshore wind projects, such as siting, which means they would have had to get the tribe's permission prior to doing so. Because that is a threat to that progress, you're never going to see it. You're never going to see it. There would be such an uproar of lobbying by these industries, including the green industry, green like the screen behind me, okay, that they simply do not want to engage with a tribe at that level, a equal level, if you
Nope,
will.
not at all. Now, FPIC is a right that's recognized by international standards,
Yep.
like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People or Peoples, which the United States didn't sign on to.
Nope.
What does that tell you?
The United States merely acknowledged its existence, and they are in last place. Canada did like a smidge bit more,
Right.
but no adoption.
Nope.
No, none whatsoever.
Now, the International Labor Organization Convention applies to relocation, culture, legislation, land use, and the environment. Now, under that international law, countries have an obligation to obtain the free, prior, and informed consent of impacted indigenous communities in all of those areas. Like I said, it's a gold standard for respecting indigenous rights. How many nations and tribes and bands know about it? Know about FPIC?
What, in this country?
Yeah.
Well aware of it. It's just that it can't. It's certainly not going to, again, not going to be embraced at the federal level. In my conversations with Fawn Sharp, she feels that in order to get widespread adoption, it has to start, state by state by state, and trying to get it adopted at that level first. And if there was enough momentum by the states, then perhaps, the federal government would eventually feel that pressure and try to adopt, some version of it. The only state in this country that actually adopts FPIC is Washington State, the state, her home state, and adopted in such a fashion where it has very strong legal support. The Attorney General there backed that tremendously, and we just need more states to be that open to it. The way Washington State is, it's a model that states can look at and adopt or modify slightly, as long as it doesn't deter the core reason for FPIC. Those protections need to be maintained for Indigenous people.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with President Sharp, but it's sad that it was mandated for countries to apply this set of rules and laws. And it's sad that countries won't direct their states, provinces, or any other form of governments within countries to abide by this.
Yep.
And it just doesn't happen in this country. And I can only speak of this country because I'm not well versed on all the countries that have indigenous people that are fighting the same sort of battles. So I hear from friends from other countries that are indigenous people that would talk about the same types of things that we have going on here. Their lands being stolen or encroached upon, or mines being, dug without any kind of consent, or forests are being decimated. But, to me, it's all lip service. It's all lip service. Why is the UN an international body? Why are they not enforcing it? UNDRIP.
Yep. Good point. Like, okay, if you don't support it, United States, you lose your seat on the council. How about that level?
Well, it should come with some sort of accountability. Absolutely.
See, that's the thing that I get hung up on often, and I'll attempt not to lecture here, but needless to say, the way laws are presumably supposed to work in this country is if you break a law, there's a consequence, and that consequence is not supposed to be comfortable.
Correct.
But there seems to be a different set of rules when it comes to politicians, lawmakers, and the like. There's some people that are far from uncomfortable on discussion points like this.
Yes. Yes. So, until feet are held to the fire and people start to feel, and when I say people, I mean governments, individuals that, can mandate that these things take place, until those feet are held to the fire and they begin to feel uncomfortable and realize that the comfort increases once you start doing what you're supposed to do, then we're going to keep getting steamrolled by BS like national defense and national security and all this other crap.
Yep.
That effectively.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That effectively ties the hands of tribes, nations, and bands that are trying to fight these, unjust, illegal actions. Once it goes into the realm of national security, that's the end of it. There is nothing else to say about it. Or there's plenty to say, but the powers that be won't let it go any further. The courts won't even hear it. And that's sad.
I was just going to say, it's not like this country doesn't understand, the function of consequences. It certainly understands the function of sanctions. Okay.
Sure.
And so if you want to take a page out of current affairs and look at, the situation with the Ukraine, it's gone as far as now because of quote unquote war crimes and I'm not saying that in a sarcastic sense. I totally believe that, Vladimir Putin has committed war crimes in the country of Ukraine. But I believe the status of Russia, as far as the UN goes, is now sanctioned, if you will. I think that they have very limited standing with the UN Council, and so it can happen depending on the severity of a particular crime. So if you have widespread abuse going on against the rights of indigenous peoples, certainly, unless we're talking about acts of genocide, that has happened in our past by this country. Are we going to hold the country accountable for that past right up to present day, relevant to their seat on the UN until they embrace the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People?
Well, it should happen, but again, it goes right back to what I was saying earlier about we the people allow this to happen.
Because death is death as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you have dead bodies in the street of the Ukraine, that's current day. But we had dead bodies in the street, if you will, from this country 400 plus years ago.
Correct.
So you don't get to wash your hands just because 400 years have passed, in my view.
I hear you. That's what they did, though.
Because the UN isn't as old as that.
No.
So, we can go back to the beginning of the UN and its existence and the time that the United States became a UN member and say, hey, oh, by the way, we did a little audit and you guys are guilty of war crimes against indigenous people.
You know why I say that'll never happen to the UN?
Well, I'm just pointing it out as
no,
a matter of function
because... I understand. But the reason I say the U.S. won't be held accountable is because they helped create the UN.
I understand. I get it. I get it. Okay, but I'm just saying. Oh, okay. So if I helped write the book, that means that I'm somehow immune to its policies and laws. Is that it?
Yes,
So
very much.
yeah, no. So next,
Yeah, yep.
you know.
I hear you. Well, the rest of this article's in the show notes. Please give it a read. It's a great article, and it just points a finger at, not a knuckle, mind you, but a real finger. It points a finger at those that are.
I'm serious. I'm a
points a
politician. I'm
finger-
serious.
All right. It points a finger at those that are in constant violation of FPIC and UNDRIP and the Respect Act, all of these things that are designed to protect Native peoples, Native territories, Native cultures, Native everything. And it's a glaring omission of concern for indigenous peoples across the globe.
Absolutely. All right, and thank you for that, brother. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Let's see. Our next article, the title reads, Navajo Nation hosts historic meeting over uranium mines. Oh, there we go. Somewhat related, right?
Yep.
Take uranium contamination off our lands, residents tell the Nuclear Regulatory Commissioners. Out of New Mexico. This is also by Indian Country Today. And let's see. I don't have the author, but article goes on here. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I was going to say there wasn't one, believe it or not. It must have been a staff article.
Okay. All right, no problem. Article goes on to say, the gale force winds that swept across New Mexico on Friday, driving fires and evacuations, gave Dene residents in a small western New Mexico community an opportunity to demonstrate firsthand the danger they live with every day. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC, members were in the Redwater Pond Road community about 20 minutes northeast of Gallup to hear local input on a controversial plan to clean up a nearby abandoned uranium mine. It was the first visit anyone could recall by the NRC commissioners to the Navajo Nation, where the agency regulates 4 uranium mills. Chairman Christopher Hansen called the visit historic, and the significance was visible with Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez and other Navajo officials in attendance. As commissioners listened to 20 or so people give testimony over several hours Friday afternoon, high winds battered the plastic sheeting hung on the sides of the cha'o, or shade house, making it hard for some in the audience of many dozens to hear all that was said. Quote, this is like this every day, close quote, community member Annie Benally told commissioners, mentioning the dust being whipped around outside by the wind. Quote, they say it's clean, it's okay, but we have more piles back there and you can see it blowing this way, close quote. Benally was referring to piles of contaminated radioactive soil and debris at 2 adjacent abandoned uranium mines. One mine is near enough to shade the house that its gate is visible. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency wants to move some of that waste to a mill site regulated by the NRC, where contaminated underground water is still being cleaned up. To drive north of Church Rock to the Redwater Pond Road community is to appreciate how close that mill site is to the surrounding community. It sits 1 mile south of the Shade House on private land, but right next to a highway driven every day by local residents. After Friday afternoon's listening session, the federal commissioners conducted a public meeting in Gallup in the evening where they had heard from EPA officials. And by the way, just a little side note, the federal government routinely holds what they call listening sessions with tribes. It's supposedly designed to gather information, our points of view, our perspective on, many times projects that can affect our lands or, issues such as what's been communicated here. Let's see, going back. It says the NRC is expected to decide in June whether or not to permit the EPA to move the mine debris to the mill. The swirling dust outside was a consistent theme during the Friday afternoon session as residents described a generational struggle with a significant health risk from uranium contamination. Quote, I'm glad we don't have air sampling going because that might scare some people, said Daryl Yazzie, head of the Navajo Nation EPA Superfund program. Yazzie connected the swirling dust outside to historic uranium exposure experienced by residents. Prior to running water being made available to them, people used to haul water in open containers, he said. Guess what? He said, you're sitting there with just a little bit of dust on you. He said, everything has dust on it. Where does that dust come from? Right behind us. Residents described growing up in a contaminated landscape, drinking water from mine sites, not told that it was dangerous. Commissioners heard about the worry parents feel, whether their children are safe playing outside. Others implored commissioners to help speed up the process, which has taken decades as health impacts like cancer and lung disease, which have stretched across generations, continue. Quote, this is not right. It brings anger, Benally said about decades of living with the contamination. Quoting him again, I'm 64 years old now. When they first came, I was only 12. How long are we going to stay here and plead and cry, close quote. So again, this goes back to action, right? And their lack of. We have these listening sessions. We communicate some very important things, such as what Mr. Benally just said. I was 12. They started mining. I'm 64. I have health problems. I'm worried about my grandchildren, right? And they go, duly noted. They check a box and they walk away. And they don't do anything. This is the problem. And these things have been communicated with past Department of Interior secretaries, right on up through Deb Haaland. The bottom line is you have to draw a line and say there needs to be a consequence now. You have the information and you fail to take action. We hear about this all the time, from radiation, lack of water, no water to, more than half of many of the Navajo communities. I've seen this firsthand. But they want to have listening sessions. Okay. Well, your listening has to turn into action now. It's as simple as that. Go ahead, brother.
I was just saying those so-called listening sessions are just I daughters and T crossing sessions. Yep, we listened. Next.
Yep, and largely that's what it is. I've experienced this firsthand. In communications with concerns we had with the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, relevant to, cell phone towers, where they actually held a forum on one of our reservations over at Mohegan. Because it's nice, right? We, have conference space there. It's a casino, blah, 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 right? Okay. They counted it as a listening session.
Yep.
The other challenge we have with the federal government in some regards is that they'll hold these listening sessions, but they won't go out of the way to advertise that they're happening, especially if they're regional. Nope. And so when, there's not a lot of Native people that show up to these things, they go, see, must not be a big deal, right? That's another tactic that's used.
Yep.
Check the box. We did our due diligence. We complied with the EPA. We complied with NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. We complied with the National Historic Preservation Act under Section 106, which affects tribes.
Next.
Next. Exactly.
Yep.
So no matter which way they spin this, even with a reinvigorated, tribal consultation policy and executive order, what is it, 13575, I believe it is, signed by Biden, but originates back to the Clinton administration. We're still waiting for action, guys. So
It's a sad state of affairs that 400, 500, 550 years after contact, not much has changed.
yep, it's just repackaged to look like some progress has been made.
Yeah.
There might be individual little projects that help the tribe. Okay. But by and large, what I refer to, and I talk about this often in my tribal consultations. I talk about, improvements in the quality of life for tribes. That's measurable.
It is.
When I read this article right here, coming out on Navajo Nation, for example, I could read a similar article like this from like 1972. Saying the
Yep.
exact same things
Same
with the
thing.
same concerns raised. We have radiation concerns, exposure concerns, lack of water. These were brought up too during COVID regarding lack of water. Okay, so while America was out there scrounging, trying to find lotion that you can wash your hands with, Navajo people didn't even have water and a bar of soap to wash their hands with, let alone Purell. So, that's why we bring up there needs to be a consequence. If tribes have communicated something to the federal government or even the state agencies that have that bear those responsibilities. Here in Connecticut, what is it? It's Connecticut Deep Department. And why they tie environmental with energy is beyond me, but a lot of states do that. And if tribes say, hey, this is affecting us, what are you going to do about it? And they say, we'll look into it, and they don't come back and they don't get back to you, there needs to be a consequence.
There should be. Absolutely.
Up including through not just firing people, that happens from time to time, sure. How about jail time? Because some people may have lost some family members. But what they'll say is, well, we understand and we're very, very sympathetic to, the loss of a loved one, but we just can't seem to find definitive proof that radiation killed your family member.
Yep. That's one of the.
Okay. That's the way they weave themselves out of said consequence.
Yep.
With legal implication. That's why going back to the other article of free and informed prior consent is a very, very important big deal that needs to be implemented for indigenous people in this country, the United States. You have to get our permission before you can do any more mining. Set up a new mine, set up a new pipeline, set up a new wind turbine for your Green New Deal.
Yep.
Am I making any sense to anybody?
Makes a lot of sense to me, brother.
So, anything on this article you want to add to, brother?
No, it just, a continuation of what we talked about in the first article, how, we get steamrolled time and time and time again. They use legalese and all kinds of other useless crap to get away with the dastardly deeds they do to native peoples. There's nothing equitable, to use the new term equity. There's nothing equitable about what's happening to native peoples. How do you in your right mind try to justify producing more lithium at the expense of native peoples to by using national defense as your excuse to do so? you know how do you sleep at night trying to do something like that? First you just don't either have a conscience, or you just don't give a rat's ass about native people, or a combination thereof. So something's got to be done. Something's got to be done.
You just used the word equitable, okay? And I was preparing, and I may still talk about this next week. I'm not sure, but I'll give you guys the Reader's Digest condensed version. I was preparing to talk tonight about something that I call consistency and equitability, using something I just found out about going on here in the state of Connecticut, which has to do with education at the high school level, public school level here, which on the onset is a good thing. But let me explain further. Legislation was introduced and passed the same year, that was 2019 here in Connecticut, where it is a requirement that public schools here make available an electable course delving in Black, African American, and Latino education. Omitted from that was Native American Studies. 1 year later, 2020, one of our state senators who has done a lot of very good work trying to get legislation passed in a variety of different subjects positive for tribes, introduced, in essence, the very same bill, but specific to Native American Studies. Hasn't been brought up on the House floor here, the Senate floor, hasn't had any motion whatsoever. Now the other one, that takes effect next year. Consistency and equitability. Tired of the tribes being last. And the way the news media positioned that particular story was, oh my goodness, Connecticut is first in the nation to do this. I'm moving because I'm pissed in my chair.
I don't think they're the first. Other school systems have been teaching those same cultures for years.
Well, I will present my information next week, and you can pick it apart. That's how they presented it. But my point still remains: why are we last?
Oh, I absolutely. I asked the same question. Why are we last? Why are we not first? Why are we not even included in that conversation?
Yep. And the difference
bill.
here. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Why are we not even included in the bill as a peoples?
Exactly. Well, I mean that's another question. It's like, okay, you're doing it for Black, Latino, and African American, and they broke that down, which maybe took a page out of your book, brother. I don't know, but what's the disconnect?
Right.
You can't include Native people. You have there are 5 state recognized tribes in this state. Our state's about this big when you compare it to other states here in the country. Two tribes are federally recognized. So there's Native people here is the point. Okay.
Right.
What's the disconnect? But again, priorities, right?
Yeah.
Ready? Here, I'll answer my own question. Voting block.
Pretty much. That's what it
'Kay.
boils down to.
Population based on voting block.
That's what it boils down to.
Our own wonderful version of gerrymandering, if you will.
Yep. Because Connecticut has large populations of each of those ethnic groups.
So anyway, that's for next week. All right, we're going to roll into our last segment here that hopefully will open some eyes. I hope anyway. So going to play a film for you guys. Now, if those of you listening on the podcast, I'm going to encourage you to come and check out the video version of this show once we get it posted on our website and also for Facebook. But for millennia, California Indians have gathered abalone and seaweed, taking only what they need. Today, their traditions are being disrupted by smugglers and colonial regulations. Along California's windswept coast in the rocky crags and tide pools, California Indians have subsisted for millennia on fish, abalone, and seaweed, never taking more than can be naturally produced. It's very key. The effects of the climate crisis combined with underground smuggling operations that supply some of the world's most luxurious restaurants have decimated their traditional food sources. Today, they continue their subsistence gathering despite regulations and keep their cultural practices alive. Today, we present the short film Hold Fast, which looks at this problem through indigenous eyes. Hold Fast is funded by Patagonia, an environmentally friendly, activist-driven retail clothing store based in California. So, without further ado, here's the film.
The food, it binds us, right? It binds us back to our ancestors. You know, it binds us forward to like our great-great-grandchildren we probably won't physically meet. And it's who we are.
Alright, let's go. Let's get out of here. You guys got everything? We gotta go on this way.
They called the cops.
God. Shit. Hurry, they're coming. Damn it.
They're trying to block the road.
They're trying to block us.
So this whole area is closed to the public.
It almost is civil disobedience. Some of the things we have to do are very dangerous, risky, and can have legal and lasting consequences for a person. There are barriers, but that doesn't mean that I should never eat again. For the pomo, the surffish is one of our main staples of food. It spawns right on the beach in rocky sand and gravel. Typically, I would have been able to cast my net and catch at least like 5 or 6 a time. We had a population decline for 10 years, and now we're back. And now we can eat again. It's a way to connect to the past and honor, to reaffirm that our culture never went away.
When your food is trendy, it's like the kiss of death. It gets harder to find. And so if it's on a plate in one country, it's doomed out in the wild.
The traditional subsistence way, a sustainable way of gathering seaweed is to just grab the long strands of pieces and don't clear cut the rock. But now that it's bougie to eat these native foods, we compete with commercial harvesters, and they do not practice subsistence gathering.
Commercial harvesters will get pounds and pounds and wheelbarrows full of seaweed.
They take scissors and a trowel and clean off the roots of the rock, and then it never comes back. So then we lose seaweed in that area for several years. My mother raised me as a single mother who was going to law school. I'm kind of not sure how she did it. As a student who couldn't work a full-time job because she had a child to raise, there's a lot of times we couldn't go to the grocery store, we couldn't get gas, but we could still eat, and that's what got us to the next day.
I always made her go with me. You know, Ariana used to be like, well, my friend said I have rights. Like, you don't have rights. My job is to make sure that you know who you are. We gotta say what's uncomfortable. We gotta do what might be dangerous. And you could take over when I die. Like, that's my job. The average California person, there's many in urban areas that have no idea that there's still California Indian people. And they'll say, you know, oh, you're Indian, you know, you're from the Midwest, or, you know, the Great Plains, or you're from Arizona. So no, I'm from Mendocino.
There are 109 federally recognized tribes. There are also more than 50 unrecognized tribes. Folks just don't know that they are in Native territory, and they don't see Native people and therefore don't recognize their rights. So that's the first biggest challenge that we have in California, is just letting people know that we still exist.
The California Gold Rush was the catalyst for the settlement of California. 1851, the United States government treated with the tribes, so the negotiated treaties. The first reservations were 25,000 acres. This reservation, Mendocino Reservation, was from Fort Bragg, the whole city of Fort Bragg, all the way up past 10 Mile, which is vacation homes. Folks said basically, you can't let the Indians keep this land. It's too valuable. Congress decided not to ratify the treaties. They locked them up under seal.
As a result, over 7 million acres of land were not handed over. And so you may be living in California Indian territory now that is supposed to belong to the tribes.
Abalone is really important for our identity. I've been to ceremonies on the Columbia River, and people had abalone shells, and I'll say, where'd you get the abalone shell? And they'll say, I got it from Fort Bragg. It's a symbol of who we are.
It's hard to describe why it's so special unless you're from a community that has a long-term relationship with that particular shell.
That's our keystone food source in our culture. The abalone would be something that I would have used at a ceremony. It would have been something I used to eat. It would have been something I used for economy trading.
You know, we shape them into bears or cut in different symbols, wear it somewhere, either on a necklace or in your pocket, and protection. Then, of course, the shell goes on our graves, and it's part of sending your loved one on the correct path.
We need these. Like, I need this. When I change worlds, I need this shell. Otherwise, I'm not going to get to where I got to go. And so it's important that we have access to that shell.
Sometimes we think of like the great-grandparents and we idolize them. They survived so we could be here. I'm not being hunted down right now like they were, right? I don't have the United States Army after me like they did. But I'm still subject to laws and rules that I don't think should apply to us. If the species are in decline, they should be closed and kept closed. But I also feel that California Indians should not come under any recreational or commercial regulations. We should have a subsistence take.
Subsistence harvests were never the problem. You know, recreational harvests were the issue.
If an area is in distress, we don't take from that area. The poachers, they'll come and take 100 or 200 to sell to the exclusive restaurants in San Francisco and Los Angeles. A single abalone could range to $4,000 per abalone. It's a really lucrative underground smuggling operation. Is there anybody around Earth?
This one is a big one. You only get the one chance because he's a big suction cup. He wants to stay on this rock. Any kind of external force, he's gonna suction down to the rock.
we're taking nowhere near our historical take. You could go to a fancy restaurant in the city and get abalone, and yet there's elders that are scared to get abalone because they don't want to go to jail and have their hunting and fishing rights taken for life.
All right, let's go. Let's get out of here. You guys got everybody? We gotta go. Let's go ahead.
They call the cops.
Hurry, hurry, they come. Damn it.
Oh, no, dear. Did you... Wait, okay, stop. Don't go by, Hillary. Don't go by.
Why? Because
They're trying to block the road.
they're trying to block us.
So this whole area is closed to the public.
We're Native American, so we went out there, we were filming some Native American subsistence activities, and it really made some Karens mad. You know that there's burials out here, it's our people.
So knowing that, you guys can be out there.
We also picked up the garbage,
All right.
and we're leaving.
Thank you.
So up here, we have a lot of tourists. They don't know what we're doing, and so sometimes they're hostile, or people will call the police. And usually, after the police are there, the rangers are there, whoever they call, the people that call the police are apologetic. They say they don't know that there was Indians there, so like we're villainized. We're just going and getting food. Which is funny because like it was such a big deal to have fish driven down from Klamath to Robinson for the big time over there. You know, for California Indians, like we took care of the land so well that people thought a supreme being had these well-built gardens, you know. I read like settler journals that said, you know, they thought that Jesus put those gardens there, and it was like, no, it was us, like obviously, you know.
Climate change and the climate crisis we're facing is opportunity in many ways for people to recognize the power of Indigenous knowledge and to recognize that tribes have the ability, right, if we could empower them, to help co-manage the environment up and down the state.
Hey, don't jinx us.
I know.
You're popular.
It's not just about saying this is mine or land back in terms of no one else has access. It's really about protecting the environment and those resources that are limited, that Indigenous people still have access to them.
We are still eating our subsistence foods. These are our places and our stories, and it is our duty to be stewards to the environment. That is reinforced in the cultural practice of our harvesting. Those are our foods, and we are the stewards.
So what'd you think?
I think it was a great video. Thank you for finding it and posting it and sharing with all of us. Again,
A little
she
inside,
mentioned-
yeah, a little inside dope. Hillary works for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. I know her very well, and works in the environmental division. And yeah, her people can be arrested for fishing in their territory.
I heard her mention the Karens when when they were leaving.
Yes. Yes.
Some Karens call the police.
The fact that now here as a comparison, the fact that she and her relatives have to sneak into their own areas to subsistence fish and gather, such as seaweed. And yet, California doesn't seem to be shutting down wealthy restaurants that are serving abalone meat. You would think that that would shut down the smuggling if you don't have a place to sell it. Anybody that watches, for example, the current season of Deadliest Catch knows that the fisheries were shut down because of COVID. If you don't have a place to sell your quote unquote take, you have no market. But yet these are still open.
Yeah.
As you saw with your own eyes, they got hassled by the police, right? So
Yeah. So again, my question remains: what's changed since first contact?
Yep. Yep. Remember, guys, these rules came here. We didn't invent them.
No.
And you heard her say, we never took more than what can be produced. Very key. Very key. Even with a tribe of thousands of people.
Yep.
Never ran out. Wonder why that is. But since everybody came, now suddenly the quote-unquote resource is threatened. Why is that?
Yeah, that's the question to be answered. And all of what we're discussing in this episode kind of helped me determine why I chose the title and what a journey it has been. All of the things that we've discovered, all of the things that we've reported about, all of the things that, most people, or I should say a lot of people, weren't aware of. It's been a journey to discover and to share and to learn all of these things. And knowledge is power, in my opinion. Knowledge is power. The more knowledgeable we are about the things that are being done to us, it gives us a chance to formulate action. And action, again, it's a key word. We've used it a few times in this show, in this episode. And we will have to take action in whatever form is judiciously possible to put it into these things. And I'm gonna incorporate one demographic here, brother, that I've incorporated from time to time when I talk about indigenous inequities, and it's poor whites. Sadly,
Yep.
Poor whites are just as much a victim to what's happening as we as Native people are. I'm not making a comparison to the demographics. I'm not saying poor people are like indigenous people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying your plight is not much different
Right.
than ours.
On the although it's not being called that, but to a certain degree, subsistence can be defined a number of different ways. It could be
Sure.
poor people that are just trying to eat.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I mentioned a television show that I watch sometimes called Louisiana Law. And I'm just saying, my observation is as just a viewer, as I see a lot of wardens, fish and wildlife, fish and game, beating up on a lot of people of color on that show for fishing to eat. Baby. Editors, video editors get to make decisions. I've made plenty of videos myself. I don't see a whole lot of white folk getting hassled by fish and game. In fact, I've seen a lot of breaks given to white folk in Fish and Game. At least on that show, as depicted.
Interesting.
So you're right. If we're talking about, well, I have to control the resource, for who? Can't say all of us and
Absolutely.
say it with a straight face.
Nope. Cannot.
So, my bag is empty, brother. That's all I got for this episode.
Oh, my bag is empty as well.
But we thank you guys very much.
Yes, absolutely. The next episode starts a new milestone.
Yeah, it does. Indeed, it does. Maybe it's time to poll the audience a little bit and get a feel for what you guys might want us to focus on a little bit subject wise. And we haven't done a poll in quite a while, so
Sure.
maybe we'll put one of those together. But in the meantime, you can always shoot us an email at host@nativeopinion.com and let us know there what you might want to hear and see and have a conversation about. We'll certainly do that. I think until we get things settled down in terms of, record dates and live streaming dates again and that kind of thing, and my brother moving to God knows where in the woods, it's just, then maybe we'll look at some guests. I know I want to get Hillary on the show. She's been willing to do so, maybe to talk about that situation more. So we'll see. We'll figure stuff out. That's all we can do.
Yep.
But by all means, reach out to us and let us know your thoughts and your ideas. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you can leave us a voicemail and or a text at 860-800-5595.
Yep.
If email is not your thing. And again, that's 860-800-5595.
Yep. It's always there, always available.
And I'm going to mention, as we have many times before, if there's something that you don't want shared with the rest of the listening audience that you share with us, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to respect that request.
We will indeed. If we don't see it, we just don't know, and so we may share it. So please be cognizant of that if you don't mind. And we try to use good judgment too. If something just looks like we just shouldn't go out to the general public, then we'll use our own due diligence as well. But yes, let us know. We appreciate that. So I guess with that, I'll just say matampane wane. And thank you guys very much for joining us on our 400th episode. We appreciate it. I'm Michael Kicking-Bear. I'm from the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation here in what was rebranded a state called, in my language, Quinnipiac.